Well, in regard to these labor issues, were there differences between the territory Republicans and the old state Republicans back here?
Not so much back here. I think the Midwest and the West were pretty much on the same page. The Wisconsin, the Republican Party goes back and forth as to whether it was formed in Wisconsin initially or Michigan. They have this argument over it. But people who know each other started the party in Michigan and started the party in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, it started in Ripon, the town of Ripon, which is the old Wisconsin phalanx, right? It's the old socialist community of Ceresco. In the founding meetings of the Republican Party, half the participants were women, along with men. It was the sort of thing that wouldn't have taken place other than at a socialist community at the time. And that's where the Republican Party came from. Alvin Beauvais and their old alliance through the land reform movement to Horace Greeley. The New York Tribune took up the idea. So the Republican Party in the Midwest and the West really becomes quite a radical vehicle. In some states, in New York, for example, the anti-Nebraska coalition, as it called itself originally, winds up voting to merge with the Whigs. So it becomes an incredibly conservative, pro-business party, as you would expect. Now, there's a common interest in terms of that Republican coalition, right? Because both of them are opposed to secession. Both of them are opposed to the expansion of slavery. So we think of unionism as this broad coalition. As indeed, I think any political movement is going to be a broad coalition if it's going to be successful.
They were listening to Lincoln because Lincoln was saying we have to stop the nationalization of slavery. The anti-nationalization of slavery is the main issue.
Yes.
And everything else has to subordinate itself during this period. Did they?
Where they found it necessary, they did. But on the other hand, even if you think about Lincoln, there's the great story about when Lincoln first ran for public office, ran for the state legislature in Illinois. And he didn't say much. There's not a lot in terms of his, but what he did say was that he favored women's suffrage. He lost the election. Never talked about women's suffrage again. But everyone knew that he favored women's suffrage. His belief was that you don't push things that you can't succeed at. So that the role of a politician, as he explained to William Herndon at one point, is to lock into place changes when the public mind reaches a point where it's ready for change. The good statesman, a good politician, locks that into place. Right. And then you don't backslide.
The other side of that, of course, is as well that particularism, regionalism, is going to tear us asunder.
Yes.
And we won't get what we do come together on, stopping the nationalization of slavery, will not come about if we go into the particularism. So that's the other part of that.
Sure, absolutely. Lincoln also believed, as I think many of the Republican leaders did, was that the Southern people generally did not favor secession. And of course, he put a lot of stock in that particularly in the early months of the war, the reason that he's holding off on emancipation, that he fires Fremont in Missouri, that he tries to sort of put the brakes on that move towards emancipation is that he's very concerned about not alienating Southern Unionists, right?
The triracial unionism, that was the goal out in these territories and in Kansas as well. How did the radicals persuade the three parts of the cornerstones of whites, blacks, and Indians to actually come together and cooperate against the Confederacy? Certainly there were Indians on the slave-holding side that had slaves themselves. They were not certainly the majority of Indians. But how did they get these to coalesce?
Well, it might be an issue of the level of corruption in terms of Indian management by these governments. That the Confederacy, for example, is claiming at one point that they have 14,000 Indians armed, and involved in the Confederate military, and as near as anybody can tell, it's closer to 600. But in terms of garnering resources, I'm sure that was a factor in all that. The situation in terms of the Union, what they were attempting to do, is that the whites who were participating in this tended to be refugees as well in many cases. Wiley Britton, for example, was a cavalry officer in the Kansas unit, is actually from southwestern Missouri, right?